just as a lead-in, we are on a virtual instance of the GIFT Symposium, so it's quite unfortunate that we're not able to meet in person, but I feel like this provides a very unique opportunity for us to reach a wider audience than usual, and to really kind of strike up some engaging conversations and where we see this technology going. And now more than ever, I view that this discussion has even more relevancy with the current state of the world. So another caveat is we are dealing with limited bandwidth, so I would ask that people turn their videos off unless they will be talking. Also, please be conscious of your microphone. It would be unfortunate if you have a live mic and you start saying things that others hear. So beyond that, we'll go ahead and get started. I have some opening remarks, and then we have a jam-packed agenda. Okay, so just a high-level overview of our day one. You'll get to hear me speak a little bit more, along with Dr. Keith Bronner, who is an active member on our GIFT team from the very beginning. And then we will pass it over to Ann Sinatra, who's also on the GIFT team. From there, we're going to cover some very interesting topics along learner modeling, competency-based methods, development. And on the second day, we are going to have a heavy focus on team-based tutoring and adaptive instructional systems, and where our research is going in that respect. You'll see a lot of that theme kind of expressed throughout the next day and a half. So we're excited to share this work with you, as well as to hear of all the other exciting work that folks in the community are using GIFT for. This also serves as a mechanism to kind of reach out to the broader community and see who else is interested in applying these technologies to support their research or even practitioner needs. We've seen some great collaborations spawned from this event. So we really encourage that. Ultimately, we're a little bit challenged in terms of the interactivity and how dynamic this event can be. So we please ask that you respect, the chaos that is trying to manage, academic discussion over this type of setting. So please use the chat window. It is our friend. We can also get a nice kind of record log of what people are thinking and what they're asking, so that we can address it more fine-tunedly. And it also serves as a nice cue for questions that we can start to ask our special presenters. So just, we've been showing this slide, I think, from the very beginning, but I think it is still expresses a lot of what we are trying to do programmatically. For those who are relatively new to GIFT, it stands for the Generalized Intelligent Framework for Tutoring. And it is a service-oriented architecture, and it is intended to be modular and domain agnostic, by which we are creating reusable parts and modeling schematics and instructional techniques that are intended to extend across domains and environments. There's a lot of challenge there, and that is why it's a very interesting research space. Another challenge is lowering the cost of entry skills for those that we want to actually apply these adaptive instructional systems. A really far-reaching objective is to provide a set of intuitive and well-informed authoring tools that allow subject matter experts and the folks that are actually delivering the training to build these types of content and take-home support. So we're really trying to get the tools out of the laboratory, and then from there it's how do we really facilitate broad acceptance in the community, and through that we're looking at standards and other best practices to influence industry, academic, and government producers. Okay, so, GIFT is growing. This is the 8th symposium. The software itself has been out since 2011. That was our first drop on gifttutoring.org. And you can see we have a pretty broad reach where we have users across 76 countries and 1,800 registered accounts at the moment. And building out GIFT has not been a single kind of contributor. We have multiple collaborators and industry partners, as well as academic partners, who have really influenced the way that we've been designing and implementing our solutions. So there's a lot of prior lessons learned that have gone into our implementations, while also addressing some of the future training needs that our customers are striving for. Couple shameless plugs here. GIFT has received some accolades in the last 12 months. We had a really busy ITSIC, the Inter-Service Industry Training, Simulation, and Education Conference. It's a pretty big conference for the modeling and simulation crowd, especially for training and education within the armed forces. GIFT received a Education Human Performance Team Award from the National Training and Simulation Association. So we're pretty honored by that. And at the conference, we also were awarded Best Paper in the Education Group, with that paper being led by Dr. Randy Spame and Dr. John Rowe out of North Carolina State. They'll be speaking a little bit later tomorrow. So we've had some shift in our focus. A lot of our research, at least internal to the Simulation and Training Technology Center, is looking at the synthetic training environment, which is a modernization program that the Army is implementing to upgrade and update all of its simulation-based training approaches, with a heavy focus on collective and team development. So within that, there are a lot of capability needs and capability gaps that our research is intended to support. Our team is very focused within the training management tools and big data and AI as it translates to learning science. So our main objective is embedding learning science and the tools and resources that the Army uses for training. But at the same time, we are a community-driven program. So our tools are open source, and we are looking for their application well outside of the domains that we apply them within. And we've built them in a way that has plenty of utility within all forms of instructional delivery, from didactic, multimedia, all the way up to interactive out in a live environment where we're tracking your movements and interactions over cellular networks and sensor devices. So it's a very robust platform, and if you have any interest in learning more, please reach out to us. This highlights what our research landscape is with regards to STE. It's a pretty busy slide, but I'll just highlight a few things. We're really focused on building an adaptive learning engine to support the STE environment. And to do that, we're focused on some of the core requirements within a intelligent tutoring system. We're looking at automated assessments at the individual level as well as at the team level. We're also looking at monitoring their emotional and affective states as they complete these types of activities. We're looking at ways to do intelligent adaptive training through managing complexity and highlighting targeted objectives within scenarios, so that not only do we know what we need to train, but the scenario is designed with the appropriate problem sets or triggers or events that target the specific skill sets that the training needs to facilitate. We're looking at innovative coaching and feedback techniques. And then, like I said before, a lot of what we apply is domain agnostic. So we really need to look at how we can apply our tools across multiple domains. From there, it's a matter of getting into data visualization and looking at, what are ways to interface these types of technologies with other counterparts in the training paradigm. What's very interesting about the synthetic training environment and its objectives are the intelligent tutoring system and adaptive training capabilities are to operate in a non-traditional manner. They are to kind of work in tandem with a human observer who is managing the training. And so now we are looking at more or less a human-machine teaming interaction problem on how we empower that human observer to be more informed on what's going on at the data level so that they can drive the training at the team level and optimize its outcomes. And we're also interested in the total learning architecture, which is another kind of high-level capability project that we're pursuing that focuses on persistent record tracking and how we actually start to influence skill development in a longitudinal fashion, and looking at ways to track competencies and link different resources to support the training of those competencies. So there's a lot there to unpack. There are two high-level instantiations of GIFT. There's the runtime intelligent tutoring, which will be covered in detail in the next talk. And we also are looking at how we can apply these persistent methods so that we can capture a performance record from an exercise, and how do we use that experience, that captured experience, to influence their training experience before the next major exercise. So we're putting all of those architectural pieces in place. We have a program called STEEL-R, the STE Experiential Learning for Readiness. It's a relatively new program, so you're not going to hear too much about it in this symposium, but there's a lot coming down the line with this effort. But what we're really looking to do is apply a data strategy to influence the crawl, walk, run approach to skill development. Each of these gray blocks represents a different training environment or training system. And ideally, we are looking at methods to track data across all of these interactions so that we are able to then influence what happens at the next instance of training so that it is personalized and adapted to that individual or team's needs. And we're all about accelerating readiness. So that's a really exciting project that's being stood up. But here are a lot of the challenges that we're still facing from a research and capability standpoint. And it highlights everything that we've been talking about. A lot of it focuses on automated team measurement. We can't really do much at the coach and intervention level if we don't have good context of what's happening at the performance and comprehension level. We also recognize a major dependency on communication. A lot of teamwork uses natural language and nonverbal dependencies, so we need to come up with unique modeling techniques to support that. And then getting into how we control the exercise. XCOM stands for exercise control and resource content management, and then looking at new innovative ways to interface with learners as a lot of these technologies start to mature and provide a lot of more flexibility in the way that you can create content and interact with content and learn from that content. So there's a lot there to unpack. We're going to get into the first talk. I'll stop for a question or two if there are any. You get to hear my voice for the next 15 minutes though. And then I'm going to pass it over to Keith Bronner, who will give a nice update on the user feature requests that have come in. So before we move on, are there any specific questions? Well, okay. Silence is complacency. So we will go ahead and move on to the first talk, which focuses on all of the major updates that we've been able to accomplish in the last development cycle. Okay. So we like to start off every GIFTSym with an overview of our architecture and features update. Most of this goes over what you will find in the new public-facing version of GIFT that wasn't there 12 months ago. We've been able to accomplish a lot, and we like to at least present some of those major undertakings in this format. You can also read more about it in the proceedings. And that's another note I would like to say. The proceedings will be available shortly after lunch. We're just fine tuning a couple last minute edits, and you'll be able to get a copy of all the papers. So, stay tuned for that. We'll put a link in the chat for easy access. I'd like to thank Keith Bronner. He's going to take over halfway through. And then Michael Hoffman, who's our lead engineer on the GIFT program out of Dignitas. We put this together for your edification. All right, so GIFT, we'll just give another quick intro on GIFT. It should be some new items to cover, and then the new features and updates. Big focus on team tutoring, as I mentioned. We're building out this human observer tool that we call the Game Master. We've done some nice we've done some nice extensions and applications across different training environments, and then just some random improvements that we'll put in the potpourri section. Keith will cover the requested features, and then we have just some awareness on the work that's going on in the IEEE world with some standards that impact the landscape that we operate with. So GIFT deployments. There are multiple. You can use GIFT on your local desktop where we have the source code available, and you can control all of your developments internally. We have an experimental version of GIFT that is hosted on our cloud instance that allows you to host a quote-unquote course or lesson that is configured in an experimental condition that allows you to access users through the World Wide Web. So it gives you a link to share via any type of listserv or social network that you have, and then it allows you to collect data anonymously. We also have the ability to host courses on cloud where folks use an authentication and you're able to actually track their records persistently. All of the cloud instance is hosted on the Amazon Web Service. We have a development server as we start to mature some of our cloud capabilities before we push it into the forward-facing. And then coming soon, we have a headless version of GIFT. We're calling the runtime assessments only version. This is supporting the C modernization, but it may be of interest to some of the industry partners out there on how you can use some of this technology to fit within your own proprietary solution. So just to go over the runtime intelligent tutoring, we have 4 modules in GIFT. We have a domain module. We have a learner module, which isn't necessarily represented here, but we outfit much of that inference in the Game Master UI at the moment. We have a tutor module. We have a gateway module that interfaces with the environments, the training environments that you are looking to adapt or influence, as well as the ability to collect raw sensor data to inform more rich diagnostic approaches. So there's a lot going on here. What we've built out is a mechanism to what OCT stands for, is an observer controller / trainer. You can just do this as the human counterpart who's going to be interacting in that training environment. So what we are really looking to do is identify AI techniques and data visualization approaches to empower this individual and to make them part of that adaptive tutoring tech chain. So we understand at our level of interaction that automated assessments at the data level are important, but not all-encompassing. So now we have the ability to integrate both data-driven and human-driven assessments into the same model space. It also allows us to start adding labels to data sets for even extended machine learning practices. So we've really built out this architecture to be very flexible where it says game state data, that is a matter of the type of environment. We say IVAS here, that's just a single instance of training that can be. Another approach to GIFT is through tutorial planning. And there should be a little bit more discussion on this, on how it extends to a team approach. This work is coming out of North Carolina State University, where we're applying Markov decision processes to personalize remediation practices. So the idea is that an individual would receive content, they'd be asked to recall or apply applications of that content to a problem. If they show a lack of mastery or understanding, then we use our reinforcement learning techniques to determine what type of remediation content that student needs to suffice the gap or lack of knowledge that they have for solving that problem. So we've created this remedial kind of effect loop in there, and that is now available, and we'll have a little bit more on that. But new GIFT features and updates. All right, so first we'll cover is on team tutoring. We now have the ability to create a team organizational structure within the GIFT real-time assessment. This is done in the properties tab of that window, and this allows you to build out as rich of an organization as you want within its hierarchical kind of structure. So it's nice because it is quite flexible, and then this now allows you to link specific tasks or assessments that you are grading a group against in a scenario to specific individuals or teams or sub-teams. So this really allows that differentiation on who is responsible for what in a given scenario, especially when you are executing problems that have distributed responsibilities. We're also interested in collaborative learning and problem solving, and we're getting into some domains in that respect, but we haven't matured out any of those specifics at the moment. It's also worth noting that we have a hosting team session lobby that references this team organization when you start to initiate an actual training exercise. So this team organization is built offline, and then when a training exercise is initiated, all of your learners or trainees will go in and they will assign themselves to their appropriate role. So it allows that control, and then once they assign themselves to that role, the system now has the context on who they are, what their responsibilities are, and what they're going to be graded against. So there's a lot in there to unpack, and we have some exciting assessment techniques at the team level that are going to be coming out in the near future. Another area that we're investing in is this human observer tool. So this is the first approach that we've taken on exposing the underlying workings of GIFT to a human observer. So the idea is that while a training event is occurring, an individual can hold a tablet and now be informed of all of the workings that intelligent tutoring system is acting upon. You have your task model here, which represents what you would have configured in that previous window, all of the tasks, the concepts or objectives within that task, and how you use data to grade. The yellow highlights the specific areas of assessment that we don't have a data approach for, and that we need a subjective human to provide input on. And then you also have the ability to influence and intervene the training through these strategy presets. So these are all things that have been exposed from a feedback or adaptation standpoint, as well as you have the ability to push these through, and then the system will also push requests based on what's occurring at the performance level. It's also worth noting that if you want the system to operate as an intelligent tutor would in a closed loop capacity, you can click this auto apply strategy, and it will just loop through all of the requests automatically. Another exciting feature within this is a playback capability. So this allows you to influence the training while it is being executed in real time. And this allows you to walk through a training event after it has happened. and it is intended to really promote reflection, conversation, and in some sense, error correction through either self-diagnosis and or through engagement with a professional instructor. So here you get a view of the timeline of the entire scenario that is executed. The red highlights areas that obviously performance was below expectation, and it allows you to explore the timeline, and you can see the movement of the icons as the scenario is executed, as well as how the performance assessments react in real time based on the data being generated. It's also worth noting that we're integrating GIFT with a tool called battle space visualization that allows a mixed or an extended reality approach to interacting with data. So now we will have the ability to, at a given moment in a scenario, if the environment supports it, we can now pause and then put either through another display or even through a VR headset, you can then embed yourself locally in that 3D environment and now start to see the interaction at that level of fidelity. So there's a lot of flexibility in that, and we're really excited to see how this fleshes out. Other new features and updates, here's the training applications and extensions. We've integrated GIFT into VR Engage and VR Forces. It's a VT mock product. As I mentioned before, GIFT is intended to be training system agnostic, and we established that through a gateway. So we now have that gateway configuration. If those who are interested, you can request through email. We've implemented an interesting muzzle flagging condition that now allows you to make inference on in a first-person shooter type training environment, where or not an individual has their rifle aimed or whatever their quote-unquote weapon system is. And this is really intended, from a military perspective, to track that an individual is not inadvertently allowing their weapon to cross a friendly or a team member in that respect. So there's some interesting logic that allows you to configure exactly which entities from that team organization that you build you want this condition class to reference, so that in real time your system can react to these types of errors in performance. And this is a really important one. And it's very extensible, and we're coming to learn that it can apply well beyond just trying to figure out whether or not someone's weapon is aiming at someone you don't want it to. We've released a exemplar chapter of this counterinsurgency course that highlights the interactive remediation capability that I was talking about earlier. And this was also what was based on the paper at ITSIC that was awarded best paper in the education subcommittee. So if you log into your cloud instance of GIFT using your credentials, you will now see this course available. And you can also go in and make a clone and go into the editing and see how they applied all the remediation and what the interactions look like. It's well documented. This is an example of a new type of remediation that we're calling active. So the remediation is based on the ICAP framework that's developed by Dr. Chi out of North Carolina State. That looks at different forms of interaction at the lesson material level. And it breaks it down into interactive, constructive, active, and passive. So that's the formalization by which we drive those decisions. And then in the potpourri, motivation is a pretty important attribute when it comes to adapting and personalizing instruction. We have a empirically informed motivational assessment tool that is now available that you can use to collect information on your students or trainee population, and then apply the outcome of that survey to adjust different personalization strategies. So that's available. Another new feature is if you publish a course in the experimenter mode, previously that course more or less had concrete poured around it, where you couldn't edit any of the interactions within. That has now been changed. So once a course is established, you can actually come over to this pencil icon, and as long as it's paused and that you're not actively collecting data, you can go in and make modifications. And then the last is we built in for that adaptive course flow object structured reviews after every assessment. That in Tune wasn't there 12 months ago, and now it is. So that's a nice extension. So these are all more or less features that have been kind of matured based on project needs. We have a number of projects that we work internally to our team, and a lot of the extensions of GIFT come from those requirements. But we are also very cognizant of features that are requested from the community. So I'm going to pass it over to Keith now, and he's going to go over the features that we pulled from the last symposium and what we did about them.
Fingers crossed that this works, right? Next slide. So this is the reckoning, right? Where everybody has requested a bunch of features coming out of the last GIFTSym, and then some of those are even written down inside of the GIFTSym proceedings as things that people actually need. And this is the time you say we did these or did not do them.
But I thought you were like giving like.
Somebody has a hot mic. All right, next slide, Ben. Thank you. So the proceedings from last year were divided up into the developer, experimental, instructional user, and then user categories, where the instructional user is kind of either a teacher or somebody that's running a live game event type thing. So kind of divided up this section into the same way. Next slide. So in the experimentation request, we met one, we kind of met one, we didn't meet another, right? So in the area that we met, the latest release actually features manual branching, and a bunch of people requested that so that they could run experiments, especially so that they could have one Amazon Mechanical Turk link that people could go to, and then they would be assigned to different paths. You kind of see that in a screenshot. And that they could all be dumped out onto a "this is your payment page" type situation. We've been using Amazon Mechanical Turk to run a good chunk of our experiments nowadays, especially considering it's online courseware type things, and Amazon Mechanical Turk people are pretty cheap. Kind of recommend to do things that way. We're running, just colloquially, we're running 80+ people at a time through it. I'm not sure you could open your course up to 1,000 people, but we just really haven't tested 1,000 people. So we'll be working on some improvements to shore that up in the relatively near term. The next one of these things was data imputation. That's coming from North Carolina State University and specifically Henderson. So we might have met it or we might have not met it depending on your perspective. Basically, the request was that if there were data holes that GIFT fill in those holes with some other data. So you can arguably already do this with Python and XML RPC or inside of the learn module by saying, have the learn module query sensor filter at some given time, and then have the sensor filter at that time report last known state. That requires to write code, but it's a pretty quick block of code. And we've been kind of cautious of this request because, generally speaking, GIFT reports the sensor data that it has and doesn't report sensor data that it doesn't have out of the box. You can configure the sensor module to do something a little bit different. So we kind of met it. GIFT can do it. It does require customization, however. Data slicing for experimental reporting, however, that's still on the list. basically the idea of segmenting out different areas of the experiment to say, take 30 seconds before and after this event and try and figure out what happened. Especially as team tutoring is coming up, and especially as our after action review playback is coming up, that's still on the list. It's still being discussed, and when we do it is up for debate. So sorry, didn't do it. Next slide, please. Cool. So on the instructional user request, however, especially as we've been pivoting towards teams, we met a bunch of things. Hey, make authoring easier. The real-time assessment authoring process has essentially been rewritten from the ground up. Having an authoring dashboard has essentially been rewritten from the ground up, as well as having an authoring dashboard was also having an instructional dashboard so that you could log in and see what all of your students are doing. And you can now do that because this game master view that Ben presented earlier for teams is also relevant for individuals. So if you log in as an instructor into the game master view and you have five people on your network that are doing stuff in GIFT, you can kind of go and log into each of their panels, and you'll have a display like this that's automatically populated based on the stuff they're doing. So hey, instructor dashboard. Streamlining content tagging. Ben Bell is going to present on this a little bit later in the day, but we did that. It's available upon request. It's really being integrated with the synthetic training environment rather than with GIFT directly, but it is doing content tagging for GIFT. It is available upon request. And then a dashboard of condition classes. Hey, that's exactly what this display is showing. And linking assessment to locations in the real world as part of that real-time assessment authoring inside of the GIFT authoring tools. We have a Google Maps plugin over on cloud.gifttutoring.org, but it's all GPS coordinates, so you can use those in the real world or mixed reality or virtual reality depending on how your coordinates shape out. So next. So we didn't meet all of the instructional requests. Population level dashboard to run sample experimental population to say these are the criteria of my population. What do I think people will experience inside of like a preview mode? That hasn't been done yet, and that's if that's something that you really need over there, Fleet, that I'm going to probably have to ask you to develop it, right? Because that's not going to be as relevant to the team level items. Because the teams will experience more unified experiences than individuals do, just because of the nature of instruction. A gradebook for instructors is very much on the near-term list, but the workaround is, as always, export using the cloud export tool in your experiment, and then that'll put things into a CSV file, and you can do an Excel script over top of it. I know that we know that that's clunky, but it does grade all the experiments. So that's the reason that it's kind of been on the back burner for a bit. So the fixed model is a feedback intervention. We do that through the Amazon Machine Instance API calls, and you can take a look at the ICD nowadays. Generally speaking, Doctor Who, it looks like you're using that to do the expectation misconception dialogue that you were advocating for in the last paper, and that's really a configuration over top of the AMI, and based on the forum traffic, it looks like you're doing that. So, hooray! Next slide. So on the learner user request, XAPI, bilateral, providing data out from our courses and then providing data back into GIFT. That works. We did it. Additionally, for the community, I'd like to make you aware that we have some XAPI profile stuff. The GIFT group is really kind of going first with the ADL's Total Learning Architecture XAPI profiles in order to do competency assessments. The person did these 3 things, and because of that, they know this one thing type of competency assessment. And that works and is heading into testing but didn't make the release, but if you need it, we probably have it. And I direct you to talk to Chris Meyer and Mike Califf, who are in this meeting today, about how they did it, what are the strengths and weaknesses, and it's available upon request. So affective state for LearnSphere, however, we record affective state in GIFT, and we have a LearnSphere export tool, but linking affective states to XAPIs is dubious. XAPI statements are really, the person did this thing. And to say the person did this thing and was frustrated, that second part is actually really a guess. It's a guess on behalf of your classifier in the frustrated state. And I realize that there's confidence intervals on those guesses. But I caution linking affective data to XAPI data, just because you're never quite sure, and the XAPI data is really supposed to be 100% sure they did this thing. Obviously, the system can be gamed, of course. That said, if you use the LearnSphere export tool, export script available on gifttutoring.org under the download section, and you tweak it a little bit to grab the affective state alongside the XAPI state, you can export it there. So it's not out of the box, but relatively minor configuration to do that, and do it with the caution that I just advised. And then adaptive course flow selectable remediation. We can do that. Ben covered it. Next slide. So we had a request to integrate with the SAMT. That's available upon request. Ben touched on some of the new condition class assessments to work with the SAMT. I realize not everybody has a SAMT, and those requests are probably going to be pretty limited. Additionally, we integrate with the VT Mock, VR Forces, VR Engage stuff, so that more or less works. And then a whole bunch of stuff on team tutoring. Sorry to Dr. Schaefer for epistemic network analysis. We really need the data first before we start doing assessments over top of it. We've set up a lot of the architecture for collecting that data at this point. So now would be the time to start integrating it rather than before now. We're just more than a year away. So next slide. So as always, the Adaptive Instructional Systems group number 2247 is active. The HCII conference was supposed to be the next big gathering for that group. And generally speaking, the conceptual modeling group has produced their draft of what a conceptual model for adaptive instructional systems looks like. And they start with Richard Tong and Bob Salaire and myself and others. We're moving forward with trying to say what this means for interoperability. So the interoperability group is kind of spinning up as the conceptual modeling group is now at full burn. And then generally speaking, the GIFT team is pushing the envelope for XAPI profiles inside of the total learning architecture, if I do say so myself. And we're working pretty actively with those groups. And I think Ben has a new contract under contract this month or next month or relatively soon in order to push forward into competency assessment areas. So that's pretty cool. I realize that I'm 1 minute over time at this point, so I'll pause for questions. So, pain points? Other things that you guys are looking for?
We'll hold for another 10 seconds.
See, in an in-person thing, the room would be full of raised hands, right?
The challenge that we have to work with, my friend. Okay. So we will move on in the agenda. I believe next up is Dr. Ann Sinatra, and she's going to give a talk on the Research Psychologist Guide to GIFT. And there you are, Ann. Take it away. So just as a warning, Elise Burmester is going to be our timekeeper. So if you hear a bell in the background, that's your 5-minute warning.
Okay, great. Thanks. Go ahead and try to share my screen. I don't see any feedback. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, if for some reason my audio cuts out or something weird happens, just you can cut in and let me know, because for some reason I can't see the chat or anything anymore. Okay. Good morning. Hi, my name is Ann Sinatra, and what I'll be presenting today is the 2020 Research Psychologist Guide to GIFT. Seems to have advanced on its own, so I may need to push it back if it goes beyond me. But so what I want to talk about first is the outline. So we'll be talking about how to use GIFT for research, some important decisions to make when you are using GIFT for research, running an experiment in GIFT, and recommendations for additional features that are relevant in GIFT. And actually, I'm really excited that the presentation came in this order, because I think a lot of the things that Ben talked about this morning, as well as Keith, are highly relevant for this. And it should actually save me a little bit of time because you're already familiar with it. All right, so the title. So the Research Psychologist Guide to GIFT, that actually comes from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's a reference to that. And here's a specific quote. It is said that despite its many glaring and occasionally fatal inaccuracies, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy itself has outsold Encyclopedia Galactica because it's slightly cheaper and because it has the words "Don't Panic" in large friendly letters on the cover. So that's Adams, 1979. So I've been doing a series of these guides to GIFT over the past few years, and I always put "Don't Panic" on the top of them for that reason, because GIFT, it looks overwhelming at first, but once you actually sit down with it and you start working with it and you look at some of the resources, it actually can be fairly straightforward. So this guide today is about how you can use GIFT for research. So I'm a research psychologist. My background's in human factor psychology. I've actually used GIFT for research. Originally when I was a postdoc, I used it primarily for research, as well as continuing on beyond. I know a lot of the people on this call and on our GIFT team have also been using it for research. So there's lots of examples of running experiments with it. There's some previous research psychologist guides. So that's in 2014, 2016, and 2018. And those were associated with the versions of GIFT that were out at the time. So I wouldn't say that those aren't relevant anymore. In fact, I think they are still very relevant. And they're interesting in the fact that they look over time at how GIFT has shifted and what has improved in it, and like certain things. If you've been with GIFT for a very long time, you know that it started as like XML editors, and now we have these drag and drop interfaces. So a lot of that's documented in there. There's also instructors guides in 2015 and 2019, and with both of these guides, it's coming from the perspective of that specific individual. As you saw in the previous presentation, there were a lot of comments that had my name next to it for feature requests that Keith was going over. So like the gradebook and instructor dashboard, again, those were from that instructor perspective. And it's great that some of those things have started to make it into GIFT. I think I already talked about this a bit. GIFT can look overwhelming, but when you really start looking at the tools and looking at some of the resources, such as these guides, at least that's my hope, it'll make it more straightforward for you. So why should a research psychologist or anyone who's doing research use GIFT? And here's some general reasons. It doesn't require knowledge of computer science or computer programming. We have tools that you've already seen screenshots of that have drag and drop interfaces. We're hoping they're easy to use. We've developed them with usability in mind so that it is more straightforward. And then we now have a cloud version which allows you to run completely online experiments, which is really great, especially if you don't have a lot of background in computer programming. You don't really want to mess a lot with setting GIFT up. Now you don't have to. We have the course authoring tool and the survey authoring tools, which have plenty of features. And as Keith mentioned, you can export the data to a CSV file, which can be opened in Excel or SPSS. So a lot of the pieces are there for what you'd need for an experiment. So right now, what I'll do is I'll talk about creating an experiment in GIFT. And as I noted earlier, there's a number of different research psychologist guidance in GIFT. So as opposed to trying to duplicate them, what I've been trying to do with these guides is do a general overview of GIFT, but then also highlight some of the things that are new in it or that are particularly relevant for creating an experiment. So that's what I'll be doing today. So it might seem like I'm jumping around a little bit, but it's actually because I'm trying to touch on some of the things that I think are most important if you're actually working with it and creating that experiment. So what I'll talk about now is creating a course. So that's like step one. And then two different types of objects that exist in GIFT that you may not be sure which one to use. So that's the slideshow versus the PowerPoint, and the survey versus the question bank. Okay, so creating a course. So the first step to creating your experiment is to create a GIFT course. And I'm assuming a lot of the people who are online today are familiar with GIFT. If you're not familiar with GIFT, what we actually call a course is that series of items that the individual participant or learner is going to be shown. When you think of course, sometimes you think of, oh, it's going to have so many lessons in it. When we talk about GIFT courses, at least traditionally, they tend to be a smaller course flow. So you're going to create that course flow, and you're going to use that drag and drop interface to create that. I think I have a screenshot on the next slide, but I know you saw one in Ben and Keith's slides as well. You're going to, actually, I'm going to skip ahead. So there we go. This is what the course authoring tool looks like. On the left side of the screen, it has the course objects. So the ones you can see on there are like information as text, image, YouTube video, slideshow. There's lots more if you scroll down. You can drag those items over to the center of the screen, which is that course flow I was talking about. In this case, it has an information as text item, which is the introduction. Then it would pull up a survey, go to another information as text, open a PowerPoint, another information as text, and then another survey. So you can see here that the survey, use my mouse, the survey text is highlighted. And by highlighting that, it then shows something on the right side of the screen that's going to give you the properties and the ability to edit it. So that's the general look of the authoring tool. Then obviously you would save it when you're ready. There's a little eye there, which is the preview. So if it's something that's able to be previewed, instead of having to run the entire course, you could actually preview that item by clicking that button. So I mentioned some of these. While you create that course or your experimental flow, you have lots of different things you can use, like the PDFs. You can create surveys, question banks, which I'll go into the differentiation soon. Things like PowerPoints, author branching, which got mentioned this morning, which I'm actually going to go into a little bit more depth about. These things like a local web page or a web address. So there's a lot of flexibility in GIFT. So maybe you want to provide some information when the participant sits down and logs in. You can do that using an information as text, or you can do that as a PDF, or you can do that as a local web page. You could even do it as a slideshow. There's so many different ways that you can do it. So there's a lot of flexibility in there. It allows you to leverage some materials that you might already have. But if you don't have the materials created, you can also use some of the tools to create them yourself. One thing that I want to note is that we talked a lot this morning about how GIFT can be used for intelligent tutoring. And obviously that's the main intention behind it. However, one of the things you can also do with it is an experiment that doesn't even include an adaptive course flow or any sort of remediation. So you can certainly use it for research that has that in there, but you can also not include those elements if you don't want them. And that way you have a consistent course flow that's always the same. Okay, so that PowerPoint object versus slideshow object. Again, you saw that it was on the left side of the screen. You drag over what you're interested in using. With both of these objects, you start as a slideshow, and you're going to start specifically in PowerPoint on your computer. You're going to create that PowerPoint, and you're going to save it as a PPS file. And then you'll have the moment where you have to decide, am I dragging over that PowerPoint object, or am I dragging over that slideshow object? And for an experiment, in most cases, you're probably going to use that slideshow object. Because with PowerPoint, the PowerPoint object, it's going to open PowerPoint on the participant's computer. So it's actually making a connection with the computer through the gateway module. And that's important because it requires that PowerPoint is installed on that participant's computer. So if you're doing something in the lab and you're using the desktop version of GIFT, that's not a big deal. You have a lot of control over what's going on, what's on those computers. But if you actually are doing something online, now you have less control over it. So you may have someone who's logged in and they don't have PowerPoint, or they have the wrong version of PowerPoint. Also, if they're connecting specifically on the cloud version of GIFT, in order to make that connection between PowerPoint and the version of GIFT in the cloud, it has to download temporarily a gateway module. And that introduces a few moments where the participant can make an error. So it's easier if you actually use a slideshow object if you can. The slideshow object, what it's going to do is it's going to take like screenshots and images of what that PowerPoint looked like. And then it'll have some navigational arrows where the participant can navigate through it. It doesn't require PowerPoint to be installed on the person's computer. However, again, it's just images. So if you have something in there that's like a macro or a video or an animation, you can't use it with that slideshow object, and you'd have to use that PowerPoint object. So there's pros and cons to both, and it's really going to depend on what you're using it for. Just trying to check my time. Okay. So the PowerPoint object versus slideshow object, here this kind of talks about what I was talking about a moment ago. If you don't have interactions or anything with images, you're going to use that slideshow object. If you want it to be a completely seamless online experience for a participant with no downloads or anything, you're going to use a slideshow object. However, if you have videos, you need more control, you want to know how much time people spend on each slide, then you're going to use that PowerPoint object. Okay, another one is the survey object versus the question bank object. This is going to depend very much on what your goals are with your experiment and what your research question is. If you are going to be using intelligent tutoring and remediation, you may actually be using the question bank. However, if you want more control over what's being shown to the participant and you want a lot of consistency in it, you're most likely going to go with the survey object. With the survey object, it presents questions in a specific order that you authored. It's always going to present all of the authored questions. And there's multiple types of surveys. So there's non-actionable and there's actionable. And each of your surveys will be one of these. But if you can have multiple surveys within the same course that are different. Something like a demographics survey, which doesn't have a right or wrong answer, you might go with a non-actionable version, versus something that you might want to be pre-graded for you, even if you're not using it at activity during your experiment. You might choose an actionable version because you have the ability to create grades, which you can also kind of leverage that to do coding so that you don't have to do it after the fact. So the coding or reverse coding. Question bank object, what that actually is a bank of questions that's linked to that entire GIFT course. In order to use it, you have to set up the course concepts, which are in, when we had that image up before, it was above course objects. You set up specific concepts, things you're going to cover during that course, and then you link those questions to it specifically. It selects a specific researcher-entered number of questions to show the participant. So instead of showing you all 10 questions that you authored, if you have a bank of 10 questions and you say, I want 4 questions, it's only going to pull 4 of those questions, and it might not always be the same 4 questions. There's ways to leverage it to make sure you get all the questions, and that's, you put 10 questions in there and then you set it to pull 10 questions. However, they might be in a randomized order. It's not always going to be consistent. So again, similar to that other image, kind of broke it down here. So when you use the question bank versus when you use the survey object, this one's going to be a little bit more subjective. Again, it's going to be based on what it is that you want to do and your goals. I would expect for myself, I would most likely use a survey, because if you have something like a questionnaire that you're using that's already been validated, you're going to want that to be in the same order every time. If you have demographics, you want to make sure everyone answers all those questions. So in that case, for control, it makes more sense to use a survey. If your question is more about learning and what's learned after the fact, and that they're able to learn based on the different concepts that are in a course, then you might actually use the question bank. So again, it's going to come down to your research question. Okay, this is just an image of the survey authoring interface. It's the same regardless of what you create, a question bank or a survey. Just that, again, it'll be in order if it's a survey, and it'll be just individual questions that are pulled from if you are doing the question bank. There's many different types of questions you can use. You can see that you can type the text of the question, you can put the options there. This is a demographic one, so it doesn't have scoring mode. So it's that non-actionable, but if you choose an actionable one, you'll have that scoring mode available to you. One thing I'll highlight is the tag on the right side of the screen. So that's right here. And that's where you would actually put a little abbreviation so you know what the question is. However, based on some of the feedback they've gotten over the years, there's a new feature there, which makes the tag not as important. And that feature is that GIFT now exports the question itself that was asked. So, which I think is a great improvement. I'm very happy that's in there now, because it makes it so that you know exactly what was asked and there's no confusion about what question the individual was answering. Okay, so let's say that you are actually doing your experiment. You've got some important decisions to make. Are you going to use cloud versus desktop? Are you going to do a published experiment or a GIFT course? And are you going to use the author branching in your experiment course flow? So real quick, this was mentioned this morning. There's a cloud version of GIFT. There's a desktop version of GIFT. Cloud version is great because you don't have to install GIFT. It doesn't necessarily require a GIFT account. If a training application is used, then the gateway module may be downloaded to the computer, as I mentioned before. If you're not using a training application, however, it can be a seamless experience. So this is great if you're doing something where you don't require a person in person. Desktop, you have to install GIFT. However, most likely you're going to have control over the system yourself. Logs are written to the computer itself, and it supports things like VBS3, so Virtual Battlespace 3, as well as sensors. Okay, so something where you have more control over the logs, you may want to use the desktop version. If you want to interact with something like Virtual Battlespace or a very data-intensive program, you'll probably want to use the desktop version. However, if it's something that just has survey-based responses, or you can get by with just images of the slides in a slideshow, you may want to use the cloud version. If you want to use sensors, since there's a lot of data passed, then you're going to use the desktop version. A cloud version, of course, if you put something up on Amazon Mechanical Turk, the participants can interact with it whenever they want. So that's an advantage of that. So a published experiment versus a GIFT course. So for an experiment, there may be a reason you want to use a GIFT course that's not published. But in most cases, you're going to use that published link. And I'll go through real quick in a moment and show you what that experience looks like. So the published experiment is when you're very happy with your course and you click publish, and it's going to provide a participant with a link. You'll give that to them. Maybe it'll go through Amazon Mechanical Turk, but it's an output link, a URL that they can plug in, and they can just go ahead and engage with the experiment. One thing to note with this is there's no participant number or name that's included in the data. So you have to make sure that you put something in there. It's like a survey option where they are prompted to enter that. And you also need to make sure that you find a way to get that information to them. If it's going through something like Amazon Mechanical Turk, that may be where you actually input that information so they know their participant number. But just you may have to get creative with ways to make sure that they get that information. It needs to, saying exactly what I just said. There's also some updated data extraction tools that are associated with that, which Keith mentioned as well, on how you can export that data, which is great. So that's those are some of the real advantages of using that published experiment. The GIFT course is when a participant actually logs in and they engage with a tile interface where they'll select the specific course that you want them to engage in the experiment with. There's, again, pros and cons to this. Since they're logged in, it's very clear who was actually participating in the experiment, which could be good or bad, especially if you don't want to know who it is. But one thing to note is, right now, currently, if you log in on Gift and you give someone a course, you share it with them, or they install it in their Gift and they run through it, you as the individual do not have a way to extract that log and get that data from it. You would have to contact the Gift team, and then we would connect you, and then we would be able to download those. So that's not a super practical way to do it if you're running an experiment on the cloud. If you are running it on the desktop, now you have control over those logs yourself. However, in order to export the data, you're not going to be able to use the same tools that are available with the published experiment. You'll have to go kind of into probably some of those older research guides to kind of see how the data extraction process works. It'll be saved in a specific file, and then you'll just have to open some of the older tools. So it's not as recently updated. Okay, this is what the interface will look like. Left side of the screen is if you do a login version. That's what the participant would see. The right side of the screen is what you would see with that published course, published experiment interface. So it'll say welcome, and then they click start. All right, so this is an important change that was already mentioned, I believe. Keith mentioned it, that this is a new feature. So how you used to have to do an experiment with Gift is that you would create that course flow. And so I'll jump ahead right now so you can see it again. So let's say this is my experiment, and that the thing I'm manipulating is this PowerPoint. So I have 3 conditions to my experiment, and in each of those conditions, there's a different PowerPoint in it. So what I would do is I would create my entire course, and then I would copy it afterwards, and I would change that PowerPoint in each version of the course, save it 3 times, and then make sure that I know which condition each participant should be in and give them that specific Gift course. So that works. If you want to do it that way, you can still do it that way. What you'll end up with is knowing very specifically which condition is each participant's in, because you know what PowerPoint they got, all that information. You also know which course it came from. So you just combine it later, and then you deal with it and you analyze. What authored branching does is, instead of having that PowerPoint right there, you would actually put an authored branch course object in that. And then it's going to open up this interface, which Keith showed already, where I've got condition 1, condition 2, condition 3. I would put my PowerPoint right here. So each of these would have a different PowerPoint. And it would run through that PowerPoint. And then if everything else was the same in my experiment, I could have it return back to my main experiment path. If something was going to be different continuously through it, I could actually build out the rest of my experiment in each of those specific branches and then have it end after it. So there's a lot of flexibility. Again, it's going to depend on what it is your specific goals are. There's a number of different distribution methods you can choose. So whether or not again, your research question is going to depend on this. Balanced, which will balance learners to the different paths and even distribution. Random, so it'll randomly assign them to it. But you may end up with more in one than the other. Custom percent. So if you have 60% down one path, 30 down another, however you want to do it, you would just make that add up to 100. Okay. What's great about that is, as Keith mentioned earlier, you have one link now that you can give to participants, and it will send them down a different path. Just one thing to be mindful of, what's changing here, is that you just need to be very careful when you look at the data to make sure you understand what condition each participant was in. Okay, so running your experiment in Gift. So for the sake of time, I'll go fairly quickly through this. So just the course flow, or your flow as an experimenter, how you create this. First, you're going to discuss you're going to do the published experiment. I'm going to discuss the published experiment approach because that's the most straightforward, and that's what you'll be using most likely if you're creating an experiment. You're going to create your course in that course authoring tool. You're going to publish your experiment and then publish course, and I'll show you the images so that you don't hear it twice. So you're going to click publish course, which is on the top of your Gift screen, and then you'll have the option of clicking one of the courses that you've created. So you click the one you like. You click publish course, that's down here. It's going to pop up and it's going to give you a URL that you can give to participants. What's interesting about this is you can actually do this on the desktop version or the cloud version of Gift, just that it'll be like a local link if it's a desktop version. Once you have your experiment published, this one's as condition 1, because let's say I was using the other method, you can see your URL will be there. You'll be able to pause your experiment or start it again. So if there's a time where you don't want to get participants' data, you would just pause it. You can also pause and extract your data. Okay. When you go to extract the data, it's going to be build a report. For an experiment, most likely the thing you're going to use the most is this survey responses option. You would check that box. You also probably want to check this box on the bottom that says merge each participant's event into a single row. What that's going to result in is each participant will be on one row and each column will have the question in it. And now that's going to have the full question text, which is a great improvement. That's how you extract the data. It's a little bit of what Keith was talking about that can be leveraged to extract the data of students as well. So again, it's not like a grade book, but it's more of the logs will be kind of consolidated and you'll see which student or participants on the left side and what they were asked on the right side. Okay, some quick updates. I think a lot of these have actually been covered either by myself or by Ben earlier as well, and Keith. So the full text of the questions now exported in the question name during survey data extraction, which is fantastic because you're not going to get confused anymore about what was asked. There's the ability to create an authored branch, which I was just talking about, and keep your entire experiment in one course. And this is something that Ben mentioned, which is really important. There's a change that's happened between the current version of Gift and previous ones, which is that there's now the ability to edit a published experiment. Before, it used to be a snapshot in time of when you created that course to when you created an experiment, and it never changed. Now you have that ability to edit that. So if you notice some sort of little mistake in it, you can go in, you can fix it without it being a big problem. Okay, so real quickly, some recommendations and potential improvements. So updating the data output methods for Gift courses. So not those published courses. So this is kind of similar to that gradebook request that's still kind of hanging out there a little bit. I mentioned the logs. So you need to ask for those cloud-based logs. And if you are using a Gift login on a desktop, you still have to kind of go through the system to find those logs and extract them. So it'd be greatly advantageous to have another way or an updated tool to extract those logs. So that's one suggestion. Another one, which is fairly straightforward, I think this is a pretty easy one that we could do, is having a template for an experiment course in Gift. So maybe something that's a published course in Gift, and you log in, and it can have an element of author branching in there, some surveys, and an experimenter who wants to use Gift for research can log in. They can run it if they want to see what it looks like, and they can also export the data after they run it, so they also see what that looks like. It can be a starting point for experiments, so if someone doesn't want to start completely from scratch, then they can use that. All right, in conclusion, Gift's a powerful tool for researchers. You can ask traditional psychology research questions with it. You can extract your data. It's a great tool for that. It's automated in the sense that you don't have to be opening and closing windows. It's doing that for you. There's great advantages to it. As you've heard earlier today, Gift is gearing up for team tutoring. There's lots of new features in there, and a lot of those could potentially be leveraged for some new research questions. So some of the team research questions, things that we haven't previously been able to do with Gift. So there's plenty in there now. There's plenty that we're going to be able to leverage in the future. And hopefully this talk today gave you a little bit of clarity about how you can use Gift for your own research. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. Thank you. Yep.
Well, there's some comments about folks happy on the branching feature. So that's a good thing.
I see some stuff in the chats. Let's see. It looks like Mike and Keith were noticing things during. But were there any questions? All right, great. Thank you very much for your attention, and I appreciate it. I think, well, I'm sure Keith or Ben will mention it, but I think there was a break. I'm sorry that I talked into it a little bit, but thank you very much.
Thanks, Anne. So you are correct. We have a short break. As a reference, all these times are in Eastern Daylight Savings Time on the state side. So we're going to return in 12 minutes, and we're going to get into a little bit more focused discussion on some of the utilities of GIFT. So come back in 12 minutes and we'll carry on. Thank you. Okay, so it's 10 o'clock on the dot. Let's go ahead and continue on. I believe up next. All right, you're already ready to go. Okay.
Hello.
Hello. All right. We're excited to hear more about your work. Take it away. When you hear a bell, that means you have 5 minutes left.
So, may I start?
Go for it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laurențiu Neagu. I'm a PhD candidate at the Mines Paris Tech Research Group in Nice, France. And today I'm very glad to present you the work, an ontology for motor skill acquisition designed for GIFT. As an overview of my presentation today, I will start with an introduction of our research project. Then I will make the parallel with the GIFT and the motor skill acquisition domain, the GIFT and ontology integrations so far. I will say a few words on ontologies for the people who are not familiar with the concept. I will present also the ontology development 101 methodology, which was used for the current paper. I will present the domain, the scope, and the existing ontologies, which are close to what we did with the project, the main ontology entities used, also the classes, class hierarchies, slots, and facets, which are concept of the ontology development 101 methodology. And I will conclude and put some recommendations for future research. Okay, as an introduction, the research goal for our team is to develop an ITS, which should be based on the GIFT framework, centered on motor skill acquisition and injury prevention when practicing daily physical activities, either at professional, at sportive, or recreational level. In a simple phrase, we want to develop an ITS for sports for health. And taking in consideration this COVID context in which we are, it may be also good timing for developing such system. At the beginning of this year, our team has conducted a systematic literature review to find usages of intelligent tutoring system in the psychomotor domain. And such systems were developed in several domains, such as medicine. We find some ITSs used in surgery, radiology, and also the military field, the training for marksmanship, and this is part of the GIFT project. There are also other systems which for which we didn't find notable results in order to put them in our literature review. But there is no previous work which was focused on motor skill acquisition in sports for general health. And this is what we want to do in the future year. An ontology is a formal, explicit description of concepts and relations in a domain. Taking in consideration the intelligent tutoring systems, the domain model, the student model, the tutoring model use ontologies for representing and are actually one of the most frequently employed and powerful approaches, the ontologies for implementing such domains. We present today the initial results of an ongoing process of designing a motor skill acquisition ontology. Okay, and considering the GIFT and the motor skill acquisition, the learning a movement pattern is a complex process, and it involves few steps for doing a motor skill acquisition. At the beginning, learners must elaborate on a suitable coordination pattern by assembling the appropriate relative motions among relative body parts, such as legs, hips, trunk, arms, and so on. After that, learners must gain a tighter fit between the assembled coordinative structure and the performance environment. And also after that, they must be able to exploit the environmental information sources in order to optimize the coordinative structure while enhancing efficiency and control. The factors influencing a motor skill acquisitions are several, from the individual one, which contains the neuromotor maturation, the environmental one, the environmental factors such as the stimulations, mechanical and physical, which includes all the speed, the endurance factors that may involve the motor skill acquisition. GIFT is particularly suited for motor skill acquisition because a performer learns to control and integrate the posture, the locomotion, and muscle activations. So for our system, because we need to consider the learner characteristics, such as the prior experience, the genetic attributes, the anthropometry, motivates the development of a gift for our project, for our research project. Considering the gift and the ontology integration, we did a state-of-the-art of what was implemented in the past years, and we saw that several recent works enable gift architectures to be more ontology-driven. In tight relation, we saw that in the last GIFT symposium, it was shown that developers are shifting towards this approach. GIFT also offers a set of XML-based configuration tools for enhancing authoring capabilities and usability. As Sotiler proposed, there are 5 core authoring processes for building ontology for GIFT. First one is authoring the learner model. Second one, authoring the domain-specific knowledge, authoring the instructional strategies, the user-tutor interfaces, and integrating the tutor components. And now let's say a few words on ontologies. Nowadays, the ontologies tend to be everywhere on peer-to-peer systems, on database integrations, are commonly found also on e-commerce, semantic web services. An ontology, as a definition, provides a vocabulary describing a domain and also a specification of meanings of terms in that vocabulary. In order to have a generic framework for as a common language for expressing an ontology, for syntax notations, for data serialization formats, it was made a common language which is called the Resource Description Framework, also known as RDF, where data can be handled using Sparkle queries in knowledge representation systems. Data is usually represented as triples, which contains a subject, a predicate, and an object, enabling the creation of knowledge graphs, such as the RDF graphs, which are used in ontologies. The standard for defining an ontology is known as the ontology web language, and its name is OVL. One of the most common tools for constructing large electronic knowledge base is Protégé, which allows developers to create and edit domain ontologies through direct manipulation. There is also simpler, like the GIF Cloud, as you guys did it for a web view. There is also a web version for Protégé, which is called Web Protégé. And again, as for the GIFT framework, is more straightforward. It's a bit simpler. It doesn't have all the functionalities like the GIF Cloud, and it's a web-based solution. The current ontology was developed initially in the Web Protégé, but afterwards we were working in a collaborative way because it's easy in the Web Protégé to work in a team. But afterwards we moved it into the Protégé desktop version because we needed future functionalities which are not present in the web version. For visualization, we use the Protégé plugin, which can be installed in the Protégé desktop version, which is called Protégé VOVL, and also the Web VOVL, which is the web version better maintained by the community. In contrast with the Protégé and the Web Protégé, the Web VOVL is better maintained and is better developed by the community than the Protégé VOVL. So the desktop version was not that good, and in the end, for visualization, we use the Web VOVL. And at the end of this presentation, I will also show you a short demo of how this interactive ontology looks like in the web version. The methodology used for developing our ontology is called Ontology Development 101. This current methodology was proposed by one of the Stanford research groups and is actually one of the most known methodologies for developing and designing ontologies. It includes the following key constituents. Like in the object-oriented programming, it has the following entities. It has classes, which are known in the ontology development as concepts. It has properties of classes, such as features, attributes, and in this ontology development framework are known as slots or roles. And also it has a restriction on slots, which are known as fat facets or role restrictions. The restrictions on slots meaning the available value that can be put in for some instances of classes. And I will show you further on when we will show you a small demo. The other existing methodologies for designing ontologies are the following: meta-ontology, ontoknowledge, neon, ontospec, didon, melting point. But as I said earlier, the Ontology Development 101 is considered as a de facto standard for building ontologies. It contains 7 phases, which we actually followed as it was in their definition. The first phase is the scope, when it implies to determine the domain and the scope of the ontologies. Afterwards, the second step is the reusage, which considers the reusing of existing ontologies. In the methodology, it is said that if you find a similar ontology already published as a subpart of your ontology, you need to reuse it. So we looked after existing ontologies and tried to reuse everything that was possible. Key terms, the third phase, which means enumerate the essential terms in your ontology. Afterwards, define the classes and the class hierarchy. Then define the slots, which are the properties of those classes. Then define the facets of the slots. As I said earlier, it's about the restrictions which are put into the properties, and then create the instances. As I was said at the beginning, this is actually an ongoing work. So for the current presentation and for the current paper, we only cover the first 6 out of the 7 phases for building the ontology. The instantiation part is still a work in progress, which will be done in the further future months. So if we take the domain scope and the existing ontologies, we try to find what problems do we want to solve by representing our ontologies. So we try to answer the following questions. For the beginning, which are the trainee learning objectives? And the questions we put in is, what are the physical activities supported by a learning environment? Which are actually the physical activities that can be solved through a learning environment? Then for a given activities, what are the fundamental and specialized movement skills that the trainee need to learn? We did a split between the movement skills are the fundamental and then the more specialized one. And for a given activity, what type of movement skills do you need to learn? Then in the trainee initial evaluation, we put the following questions. What are the corresponding readiness requirements? What are the corresponding tests supporting the assessment? Because in order to propose a training plan, you need to assess a trainee level. And then what are its associated assessment level and the performance criteria? Then at the trainee program level, we put in some questions also. What are the required qualities and the minimum performance level for a movement for a given movement skill? So if I want to acquire a movement skill, what are the required qualities in order to be able to acquire it? And also what is the minimum performance level? And also what are the associated training modalities for a given quality? Then at the training program applying step, we also raise the question, what are the workouts required to achieve a training method? We did the split when planning a training program. We split it into from the training session, which is the most granular level, which is composed of a set of exercises. Then we put it, the next level is a microcycle, which is composed of a set of training sessions. Then the mesocycle, which is a set of microcycle. Then the macrocycle, which composed of mesocycles. So with this question raised, we started working on and try to build our ontology. We also looked what is also available at the moment when we started the work. We found some existing psychomotor taxonomies, which are the older ones. Harrow's and Simpson taxonomies. And also we found some more recent work, which is based on this most known taxonomies. And also we looked for existing ontologies, and we found ontologies for supporting motion recognition, such as ontologies of verbs describing human motion, which are more recent works. Also video movement ontologies, which provides classes describing the movements, and the Kinect ontology, which provides classes describing bones and joint hierarchy, and classes describing human activities and behavior. The next phase implies to put in the main ontology entities. And in here you see a schema representing the main entities which composed our ontology. And those are the movement pattern, movement skill, training program, psychomotor profile, and trainee, each of them with relations between them. From the class hierarchy point of view, we have the fundamental movement skill and specialized movement categories, and each of these classes have subclasses, such as for the fundamental, we have stability, we have locomotor, we have manipulative, each of them having specific properties. For the specialized ones, we have daily life, leisure, professional life, and sport movement. If we look at the slots or the properties, we took an example for the movement pattern properties. We have the following slots available. A movement pattern has some goals, has some rules, has a complexity, has an equipment, a muscular aspect, a temporal aspect, or an environmental aspect. And for the allowed values are the facets that I was saying before. The facets are the available values for these specific slots. If we look at a visualization of the ontology, even though it may look messy, there are a lot of fields which were represented through it. I will show you a live demo very soon. For example, in here you see the generic profile subclasses properties, and in here you have the generic profile, which is the class in the middle. You have flexibility, which is inherited from it, morphologic inherited from it, anthropomorphic, functional, perceptive, and so on. And each of them with the specific slots. And in here we have a partial web VOVL visualization containing the motor skill acquisition ontology. And on the left we have specific classes with slots, and also in the right specific classes with slots. As conclusion, we presented today to you an ongoing work for designing a comprehensive ontology to represent the motor skill acquisition domain. While following the OD 101 methodology, we developed 6 out of 7 phases, the instantiation being actually the hardest part, which will be done in the following month. The end goal is to integrate the ontology in a learning environment. We want to do it in the GIFT framework, able to assess and enhance user progress in sport for health activities. Most suitable system for our goal was ITS. To overcome the limitation of an ITS, we decided to use GIFT. We are at the stage of starting development of our own system based on GIFT. The final version of this presented ontology today will be published online under an open source license and integrated into the linked open vocabularies initiative. And now very fast, because I know I exceeded my time and Benjamin probably will tell me that soon. I want to show you very fast. This is actually the web VOVL representation of our ontologies. For the people who are interested, I can actually share this version, this file with you, and you can play and take a look into it if you are interested. And yeah, that was all from my presentation. I'm very happy to hear your questions.
Thank you very much. You're actually right on.
I heard the beep, Benjamin. I heard the beep. So yeah, I was going very fast. I had more stuff to say, but yeah.
So I have a question.
Yes.
With regard,
if you want, I can share again the screen if needed. Would be needed.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
With the nuances of modeling psychomotor behavior, how does your ontology handle, non-traditional approaches, but with acceptable outcomes? So an example would be, if you're measuring somebody doing a free throw in basketball.
Yes.
And you have a model on what good free throw shooting is, and then someone walks up and then shoots granny style, underhand. Your model will tell them that they're doing it all wrong, but they will make it. So how do you balance that? And does your ontology handle that representation?
Thank you for the question, Benjamin. In our work, we are now, actually in our research group, we are working with sport coaches, with athletes also on assessing and measuring the data. And at this point, we started the work on some of the most basic tests for assessing a user skill. And this is called the fundamental movement skills, which is contained of a set of 7 test exercises. And we try to track that and iterate through them until we make them perfect. And then we will evolve, I think, through trial and error. But for now, we want to focus on actually automatizing the FMS, the fundamental movement skills, which is actually the de facto standard for assessing a user level. And after that, I think we will take it step by step with future exercises in different sports. For the beginning, start simple and then we'll grow on it.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Greg Goodwin. Can you describe just briefly how would this be used in a training application? So if you were attempting to, you're looking at a skill acquisition over time, how would this be used in that context in GIFT to assess somebody, as a beginner versus an intermediate versus advanced? Because I could imagine it's not the way the skill develops may not just be a sort of linear addition of additional components, but it may fundamentally kind of change along the way. Over. Yes.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, and we are actually very close, even though we don't want the same accurate results like the US Army with the project. We want to still want to be as precise as possible. So we already work on integrating in the system sensors from wearables right now in order to see how they react during a training session, how their heart rate grows also during the night and so on. We have this medical proof behind us in order to see that it was a good workout for him, it was not a good workout. For the planification itself, we also use reinforcement learning, as I was showing in the previous presentation that Benjamin presented. So what we want to do is also through the sensors to see if it actually was good or bad, and we track for the most common wearables, we track the data, and also video analysis on the subject itself. Now, through these COVID times, I think people are not that skeptical on filming itself doing a training session. So being home, I try to do a set of exercises, and through automatical processing of the video, we'll say if it's good or bad, and we'll give a mark on that. And through that, we will see a progress path. Does this answer a question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and for this video assessment, we use OpenPose library, which is the most common one on this, and we just do the assessment based on some patterns for seeing how good or bad was the exercise.
Yeah, Greg, make sure you check out the paper. It's really well written. So Dr. Ben Bell left you a comment in the chat.
Yes.
Referencing some prior work looking at psychomotor acquisition in GIFT with a link to a presentation. So check that out and maybe reach out to him if you have any questions.
And I'm open, guys, for future, any discussion afterwards, it would be useful, I think, for both parties. So I'm open to speak with any of you, and hopefully we'll have a good partnership for future working together. Yeah.
Great. Any more questions? We still have some time. Okay, well, thank you very much. Very good presentation.
Thank you, Benjamin.
Okay. Well, moving on. Our next presenter, I believe, is Miss Lucy Woodman from Synaptic Sparks Incorporated. Lucy, are you on?
Yep, I'm right here.
All right. Feel free to take control.
All right, perfect.
We're a little bit ahead of schedule, but at least we'll give you that. When you hear that bell, that means 5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Hi, good morning. Really happy to be here, even virtually, at GIFTSym8. I am presenting for Synaptic Sparks, as Ben said. My name of my presentation is Using GIFT, Competencies, and Virtual Reality Training to Provide Effectiveness Improvements for Nuclear Technicians. So as Ben said, my name is Lucy Woodman, and I've been with Synaptic Sparks for 2.5 years. My co-authors for this paper are Mike Califf and Chris Meyer, and they've been with the company since it began. Our paper will be made available as part of these proceedings with much more detail than we can cover here. So please feel free to reach out to GIFT organizers or any of us with questions that we maybe can't get to during this event. So this presentation was originally intended to be a demonstration, but due to obvious reasons, that's not possible right now. So instead, we're going to do our best to explain how we brought competency-based training paradigms into GIFT. We'll go through and show some pictures, videos of the live system, and hopefully be able to co-locate in a physical office sometime in the future and offer demonstrations to anyone in Orlando at a later date. We'll be talking to you about one of our most interesting training projects involving nuclear reactor training. We'll talk about how we built a competency framework around it and how interesting it was to be able to modernize training further by allowing GIFT to do one of the things it does best, and that's provide adaptive instruction and tutoring. So first, just a little explanation on why we are not mailing everyone HTC Vive Pros, supercomputers, or having the entire system online. Well, we're not made of money. The full system is actually pretty complex. The whole goal here is to bring in competencies for GIFT to use as course concepts. If you're not familiar with those terms, don't worry, they'll be explained in detail later. But these competencies do need to focus. They can't just be test data. Having real data really helps us as co-developers to understand that we're not only engineering software correctly, but we're engineering it wisely and on target with the GIFT community's needs. Another nonprofit project that we contributed to was to help modernize trainer in the nuclear reactor sector. Now, this is not our opinion, but we've been told that the nuclear reactor training programs have been in need for modernization for a couple of years. So through joint multi-company efforts, the nuclear reactor training system was created, essentially to create a virtual but also desktop compatible program in order to let technicians train on topics that they might not otherwise have had access to. And since we had license to demonstrate it but not own it, it was a perfect fit to use for domain knowledge when trying to come up with competency frameworks that we could build in CAS and integrate into GIFT adaptive tutoring methodologies. So this slide is a bit of an eye chart, but it basically explains what GIFT is doing in the context of this project. Now, as always, GIFT brings everything that it normally does to the table. But in the context of competency frameworks that are becoming much more accessible through GIFT every day, it is a new capability added to GIFT through piggybacking off of course concepts. For anyone that's not familiar, course concepts are properties in GIFT that are used to tag not only courses overall, but also concepts inside of the courses. Once an author tags a course object in a GIFT course, or tags course content as covering a course concept, GIFT tutoring can automatically start taking place within that course. Competencies allow GIFT to have yet another avenue by which to tag these courses and content and enable adaptive tutoring. So looking above to the chart, we start to see the different parts of GIFT that this undertaking has influenced. There are sensors through some of the specialized nuclear reactor training hardware that could be pinged for status using GIFT's pre-existing sensor integrations. So similarly to the heart rate monitor that we presented last year for GIFTSym8. Now, creating an entire competency framework from the ground up is a major undertaking, And that's why the GIFT team studied existing and available technologies, which we'll get to in just a moment. But first, I just want to show you a quick video on selecting, editing, and canceling course steps accessed in CAS. And just like standard course concepts, a competency entered through the CAS tool will become accessible in a GIFT course. Now, which competency framework is provided to authors, how it's selected, and whether or not users will be able to point to their own CAS servers and competency frameworks. Now, these are the items that are currently in development. But what we have now is an available online editable competency framework that a development version of GIFT can access through REST calls. In this context, REST is just a standard protocol that GIFT, CAS, Unity, and therefore the entire nuclear reactor training software use so that they can all communicate together. So now we're going to look at next about where these competencies came from. Okay. CAS stands for the Competency and Skills System. It's an ADL initiative and it's open source. It ended up being perfect for integration with GIFT due to all of their compatibilities, not only on the software level, but logistically as well. There's a link here that I provided if anyone would like to check it out. And using these open source tools, we were able to not only create a framework for our own use on the CAS public server, but also to create one of our own for exclusive use with GIFT. There are some special configurations and work that still needs to happen in order to stand up the specific server. So again, after things get back to normal, all of these artifacts will be provided to the community as part of this bundle. When you access either ADLs or our CAS server and make a free account, you'll immediately hit the landing page. This page will allow you to do far more with frameworks than we have time to discuss in this presentation. But for the GIFT integration, we mainly focused on creating a framework that directly ported the competencies and lesson steps that were provided to us from the nuclear training efforts. We also have some squad overmatch style framework data provided by the CAS team. And it also sounds like there may be some great medical framework data on the way. All of these different styles of competency data really help us design the capabilities in GIFT correctly so that we can meet the community's needs. You can also see here some of the steps that we ported over from the nuclear reactor competencies. And a special note is the concept of competency relationships to each other. Having standalone competencies in a good technical solution would be one thing, but being able to utilize all of the other capabilities alongside GIFT, it really opens the door for adaptive tutoring and content recommendation, to name just a few things. The ability to tag a course and course content, and then being able to gauge learner profiles and their progress through different competency trees is really where this project showed us the potential of what was going on here. The ability to combine those profiles and aggregate them up to team and squad levels of mission readiness assessment is of great importance to a lot of the GIFT stakeholders. Throughout our nonprofit and community service efforts, we've come across a lot of areas where we can give assistance. It turns out that the Department of Energy was one such area, and it was due to the state of training being in such dire need of modernization that we got involved with the project. We got to be part of a multi-company effort in order to enhance training across in-need sectors. This effort coincided with GIFT's need for formal competencies to test use cases against, which led us to combine the GIFT integration efforts to include a competency framework and some of the most modern training available on a desktop PC. We have over 100 steps of nuclear technician training, complete with desktop and virtual reality versions. This was a multi-month effort, and the training tool is now actually deployed in the field, which gives us a real opportunity to be included in on those baseline results to test this project's adaptive training improvements against later in the year. Okay, so here are just a couple of screenshots from the nuclear reactor trainer system. I want to point out that each part was modeled down to the millimeter level of accuracy. We really wish you could have seen this system in both desktop and VR modes, but again, later may be an option for anyone in Orlando. You can see here some of the examples of instructional pop-up wristband guides on the VR controllers. And now that we've talked about GIFT using course concepts and competencies in adaptive training, you might be able to start drawing some conclusions of how some lesson steps became competencies and then became concepts. For example, the line items 5 through 8 above could be about proper valve disc maintenance as a sample higher level competency, but also have a relationship to finer grained competencies that are the individual steps. We kept this project simple and just gauged learners on correctness and time spent on each step. But with more guidance and work, GIFT can use this information to adapt to all levels of content, to all levels of performance, and adopt training in each individual learner's needs in the most ideal way. So now that we've chatted just a little bit about what CAST is and why competencies allow us to gauge course content and tag courses with various concepts, we'll have a quick video on how it works in our project and how we hope to deliver it to the community later. First, setting up a CAST server or using the ADO CAST team server is necessary. Again, ours is located at castdev, gifttutoringclouddev.org, and is written down in the slides and paper for your reference. You'll also need a GIFT server, which already has AWS images available for use. Instructions for this are online at gifttutoring.org. You can also ask any of our team members for access to the shared AMIs that you can use to set up your server. Otherwise, it will eventually make it to GIFT Cloud as part of a formal deployment. So once both servers were set up and operational, we created a CAST framework directly mirroring what competencies a certain field of study had. We have the 68 whiskey competency list provided by the CAST team, and I believe medical competencies are incoming. Of course, we created the nuclear reactor training competencies, which you will see in this video. The really important parts that you'll need to enter into your CAST framework are the competencies and their relationships to each other. I just want to point out, CAST is a framework, but it's the subject matter experts that determine what competencies are necessary as requirements to others, which are related to each other, and how all items in a certain framework relate to each other in order to support being included as part of that top-level parent. This will allow anyone to create learner profiles based off of valid competency frameworks. And as GIFT has ways to access user accounts and learner record stores, we'd like that path to be part of our future roadmap as well. And to conclude, once your framework is in CAST, we have a prototype GIFT server set up to reference the nuclear framework specifically that allows GIFT to tag nuclear reactor trainer competencies, just like an internal course concept, and with all the benefits of course concepts brought along with it. Again, that allows GIFT to use the competencies as course concepts. And there's a nice how-to video on the gifttutoring.org YouTube channel about it, if you'd like to learn more about everything that is enabled in that system. So we're about to show you the virtual reality nuclear trainer with GIFT adaptive instruction based on competencies. But I'd like to give you some context on what you're about to see first. The original nuclear reactor trainer software was very linear, and it was really meant to serve as refresher training for nuclear technicians. So in other words, their goals centered more around experts needing refresher training on their already expert knowledge, rather than learning completely new material. This was a great goal that we just wanted to help take to the next level because we know GIFT's adaptive tutoring capability can really help out in those cases. So once GIFT and CAS were linked, and we had some SME knowledge to use as a course concept, we hooked up milestones in the virtual world and the middleware messages to let the systems talk to each other. There's more details in our paper if you'd like to read some more of the technical details. Or you can also check out the GIFT developer documentation on integrating with simple external applications and sensors. This project is still in the prototype phase, but we'd like to take these results in future efforts and make formal GIFT course objects or extra properties to be integrated into GIFT cloud releases that add a lot of the same capabilities that are starting to be there with CAS. As well as competencies, learner profiles, and the Unity game engine for projects like this. So now that you know the learning paths we had GIFT add in to the nuclear reactor training software, let's take a look at another quick video. Again, we really would like to eventually allow people to be able to play around VR themselves, but at least this video will show you how the GIFT course corrections happen. So what we're going to see here is primarily the virtual reality screen capture. And since we didn't have our normal studios, it was filmed in Chris's living room. So please pardon the informal nature of the video. This is the modified version. So remember that the original training environment is just one big static linear scenario without feedback or reinforcement of any kind. So the lesson starts, the correct competencies have been entered in as concepts, and the learner is going to demonstrate how to do things below expectations, either by clicking on all the wrong things or taking way too long to complete the steps. So the learner reached milestone 1 and catching up to milestone 2. And now they're going to be sent back to the first milestone to repeat the content by GIFT and the middleware messages. This can happen anytime a GIFT course is programmed to identify incorrect behavior. So as the system matures, the feedback and learner correction and/or content recommendations for competency acquisition can get as fine-grained as an SME would determine is valuable. Now we're going to try the lesson again, except this time we're going to ace every step. So the learner goes through, acts like they know everything and don't even need to read the instructions, and therefore they get to warp ahead to the milestones we identified that basically skip entire chapters of content. So I know that was a really quick look at how the whole system works together, but we're going to move on and we're going to conclude the presentation and get to questions soon. We have to admit that we are still gathering quite a lot of data about the project performance as a whole. So the modernized training content is still being deployed and tested across nuclear reactor stations. Getting virtual reality kits physically has actually been the #1 challenge over the past few months. But since the reactor's training content SMEs are not intelligent tutoring experts, adding an adaptive instructional system like GIFT on top of this learning methodology has already given us undeniable improvements to the system as a whole, even when looking at something as simple as the time necessary to go through refresher training. So the measures in these charts should be taken with a grain of salt and as ratios of scores compared across categories, because we're still gathering data. To conclude, that has been our project in GIFT that we have enjoyed presenting to you here at GIFTSym8. We believe that we are able to create an intelligent, adaptive tutoring system with GIFT and competency frameworks and blend them together in a use case that just happened to be a great test bed for some of the GIFT work going on. Thank you very much for your time. And are there any questions?
Thanks, Lucy. Open it up to the group. Sorry, Lucy, are you?
Hey.
Oh, go ahead, Greg.
Oh, so yeah, I guess, I don't know if this is a question or just more of a discussion topic, but I know there's a couple of ways that we use this idea of competency. One is, I think, the way ADL sees it and the way, Lucy was discussing it. And then the other is sort of in this notion of getting away from the Army's typical grading of go, no go, or maybe a 3-level kind of TPU, and trying to really, use, for example, these CAS-like competency frameworks to provide a much more in-depth understanding of an individual's skill level. And, I think it's something worth being sensitive to and understanding there may be some confusion when we use the term competency. I don't know if that was anything that, Lucy, that you all contended with, as you're sort of putting this together. But anyway, I don't know if it's something you want to comment on or discuss over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we didn't run into anything like that thus far. I'd say the competency definition is still pretty broad, so it seemed you can kind of allow it to fit into kind of any mold that you're going for.
Okay, that sounds good. Ben, you were going to ask a question, I think?
Are you doing anything particular to monitoring behavior and performance in the VR space? Is there anything unique associated with how you're using that type of interaction data?
I'd say the most unique thing so far is trying to integrate the sensors. So, to get their heart rate or things like that, figure out if they're in any kind of distress. So that's been helpful.
And you plan to map those kind of signals as a component to the competency?
Yeah, that would be great to do eventually.
Any other questions? Nice. We're going to have to insist people start drinking more coffee. And, chiming in a little bit more.
Well, Lucy, you did an excellent job. I really enjoyed your talk.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Okay, so, the agenda is out there. We have one more talk leading into lunch. But, the intent is that this is a very open engagement, where people are coming and going as their schedule allows. So I'd like to pause and take a quick 10-minute break so that we can start the next talk at 11 in case people are planning to join for it. And then we'll break for lunch at 11:30. So everyone come back in 10 minutes and we'll do the next discussion. Thank you.
Dr. Liu, can you hear my mic?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. We're going to have 3 authors to talk in turn. So I'm in controlling. Can you see my slides?
Yeah, we can.
Great.
We're going to wait just a few more minutes so that we catch up with the agenda in case someone else planned to join.
Sure.
All right, great.
It's amazing. We got 60, almost 70 people, all the time, the highest time. So it's pretty successful.
Yeah, we had 80 at one point, but I think a few had jumped off. But we're expecting kind of an ebb and flow. People leaving and
coming to go. Oh, by the way, Ben, are we supposed to talk 20 minutes or 25 minutes? What's the frame for the 30 minutes?
No longer than 25 minutes.
Okay, sure.
Somewhere
between that.
Yeah.
Not many people ask a question online. When we switch to teaching online, students are very quiet.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge that there's no good answer for at the moment. I was on a workshop earlier where they wanted everyone to have their cameras on so that
that's too hard.
Some accountability, but I'm nervous about the bandwidth issues with this number of people.
I know Zoom may have some security issue, but the Zoom is really very user-friendly. You can get 40 people simultaneously without a problem, with the face on.
So the Zoom is an absolute no from our organization.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay. Are you back into office or you are still working home too?
About 95% of us are still working from home. There's a very small group at the office.
I see.
But hopefully that will start to change in a couple of weeks. It's a phased approach.
I don't know. Thank you, Ben, for agreeing to give a presentation to the workshop we're organizing. We really looking GIFT platform as our future direction. So we'll see the situation. The first thing is to keep everybody safe and comfortable. Might be a mixing of online and face-to-face. UCF give us a big room. They can probably host 200 people. If we get 20 people, I'm going to provide the masks. So should be safe.
All right, yeah, it sounds like you are handling the logistics appropriately.
Yeah, we'll see from the situation. Look for, check everybody feel comfortable in their own way.
Very much so. I'll be happy to talk with the group again.
Thanks. Okay.
Hi, Hong.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. All right.
Okay, good. Okay, sure. All right. Tim, you want to try? Tim?
Test.
Test. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Very good. All right. Let me introduce first, then I will going to turn over to you. All right.
Yeah, I think we're good to go. So you get the esteemed position of leading us into lunch. Very much looking forward to hearing your presentation and take it away.
Thank you, Ben, for giving us this opportunity. My name is Hong Liu, and this paper was co-authored with my colleague, Keshav Achava, and one of our students, Timothy Bernard, a graduate student. Our title is Using GIFT to Develop an Adaptive Remedial Course for Graduate Degree Program in Data Science. We got a master degree in data science. Tim is one of our early students. So our talk have 5 sections. We talk about the need, the goal, approach, the implementation, and the future work. I would like to let Keshav talk about the need and the goal. Keshav, it's your time.
Thank you, Ong. So first of all, I would like to thank you for giving an opportunity to talk in this virtual conference. It's a pleasure for me to speak about our project. So in this presentation, we talk on instructional design and work in progress using GIFT to develop adaptive remedial mathematics courses for a graduate program called the Master of Science in Data Science at our university. So first of all, so nowadays we have huge bunch of data to analyze in every field of science, commerce, engineering. So that needs have to address that need. There is a data science program in every universities, almost every universities in the United States. And so many students are attracted to the data science program, and the students are from diverse backgrounds. So we have huge diversity in the students. That means so students have various backgrounds in mathematics that is required for the data science program. All right, so many students are attracted into the data science program. So to address that need, the Embry-Riddle University have the Master of Data Science program in 5 tracks. So one is high performance computing. The other one is cybersecurity, and the other one is aviation safety, aviation business, and homeland security. So we have flexible with this track, with these 5 tracks to in our data science program, and we are open to welcome all every type of students, and again, since this is a data science program, and there is a huge bunch of data to analyze, and they are all high dimensional data, so there is a certain level of mathematical skill that is required to go for this graduate program. So therefore, we have a prerequisite for the to get into the program, and the prerequisite include the matrix calculus and matrix algebra for the data science program. So for that, students with the various backgrounds, so not necessarily have these concepts or this mathematical background. So the students with the many engineering program, they take the math classes, advanced math classes, and they have knowledge of matrix calculus and matrix algebra. However, some students with the business major, aviation safety major, and so they don't have that mathematics background. So they have a deficiency of such matrix calculus and matrix algebra, and without having this matrix calculus and matrix algebra, they won't be able to understand the high dimensional data. I mean, they need to have a certain level of understanding to get into to take the courses of in data science program. So these students from the so therefore we need to prepare the remedial math courses, matrix on matrix algebra and matrix calculus, so that we have an option to offer conditional admission to those students, and they can take these two remedial math courses during the summer, so that they can, as long as they enter the program, they can complete the master program within 2 years. So therefore, we need to have those two remedial math courses to let the student take the classes during the summer and have necessary understanding or have enough mathematical background to enter the graduate or master's program in data science. Okay, but for that, so there are other, other open sources like massive, online open courses. But this massive online open courses, it's very good for for several courses. Taking online, they are free, and it has been used applied. However, this MOOC or the massive online open courses have the lack of feedback and peer support. So therefore, we would like to incorporate GIFT to run these two remedial math courses. So both matrix algebra and matrix calculus are organized in 12 lessons with 24 lessons in total. So some of the lessons can be adapted from the course called the material of mathematical modeling and simulation, and other are created, and we would like to adopt this GIFT to run these courses. Hong, so I would like to request my colleague Hong to proceed from here.
Thank you, Keshav. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to talk about the approach. So this we actually reuse and repackage the source we developed from a project sponsored by the National Science Foundation from multiple institutes. Actually, this project lasts for 6 years now, and I have my colleague Raphael now in the audience. We have 4 universities developed the 6 courses. One of the courses covered the most of the content we need here. So we're going to just shift this resource and rewrap it with the GIFT tutoring to make it really more helpful to the students, but not increase the workload for the teacher. So that's our real goal. So to talk about the resource we developed in the last 6 years, talk about each lesson is going to have those material. Each lesson covers 3 to 5 concepts or the procedure skills. And we have the lecture notes in the ebook form, PowerPoints, YouTube, particularly one for each concept or skill. Each one is around 10 minutes. And we have the quiz for each concept or skill in the Google form, and then exercises and the homework. So the material is pretty much ready. So the pedagogy part, we learned that the student-centered pedagogy, and in order to find the right way to move it online. In 2017, we participated the summer workshop in CMU, and that's the so-called integrated instructional design. In that design, we're going to make sure the internal consistent structure among the three components: the learning objectives, the assessments, and the instructional activities. Make sure the three aligned together. So the objective defines the student competence. And here I want to give one example. It's really a long sentences, mouthful, to check the student ability and the understanding of the principal component analysis. And the goal we write it down is this: the students should be capable of using the eigenvectors of a covariant matrix to identify the principal components of a numerical data frame. So traditionally, when we write the learning objectives, we write what we are going to teach. But what we are going to teach is really different from what the student will learn, was showing they have learned. So this student-centered pedagogy requires us to write the objective from the student perspective, what they can do, and then the assessment ask the question how to demonstrate the student really can do it or understand it. So we identified those challenges from the literature review and also our personal experience. When you move the teaching, the learning online in the distributed environment, the first thing is disoriented for the students online by themselves. So that's why GIFT is the great tool we identified. And then this tool has the recommending engine to provide the adaptive or personalized learning based on the data-driven assessment. That's the challenge number one and the solution number one. And the second, how do we give immediate feedback if we know the student has a misconception and misunderstanding something? Well, that the building library for concepts and the misconception for each lesson and the survey of GIFT will help us to catch this and provide immediate feedback. And we also encourage students to collaborate each other to have a peer learning and the block discussions. And sometimes the instructor in the loop. And the other thing is the pre-knowledge from the past experience. We need to have this learner model, the record of learning management system and the learning record store looks like a great facility for us to use to have the student data. And then identify the cognitive load. We did not do much at this moment, maybe in the future. And we're going to also try to use the teamwork to monitor the effective traits and intervene. And we built some kind of in-house web bot called Bot Captain to collect the data. But in the future, we're really excited to look forward to the teamwork and the team model of GIFT. So we do not reinvent the wheel, and we can use the function of GIFT team model. The last thing is evaluate student motivation, and we're going to use a GIFT survey in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. And this is what we did in the past 6 years. So I'm going to give the time to Tim. Tim, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, now you take over and turn on your video. We can see you.
I did, but I don't think. Let me see.
Yeah, now I see you.
All right.
Yeah, that's better.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Timothy Bernard. I'm a research assistant working under Dr. Liu. I'm going to explain the technical implementations of what was just recently described. So there are three main components to this design. First is GIFT, and that's going to be used for course authoring and also tutoring any in-class exercises or authoring like any quizzes that the professor may want to prescribe to students. Essentially, it's I guess you could say the main tool for building the courses. The second part is the database. That's going to follow the XAPI specifications. And this learning record store is going to be the main proxy for exchanging any learner states or any learner or any data changes between GIFT and Moodle. And Moodle is going to be the front end application for students to actually interface with the course. Essentially, it's going to be a website that they visit, they log in. That's where you're going to take quizzes and do homework and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is actually going to have GIFT embedded in it. So that way, whatever the professor makes, that will be embedded in that front end. So for the cloud and local server differences, there are pros and cons to each. With a cloud solution, you're abstracted away from the setup process, and also like the install configurations. The service provider will pretty much do most of that low-level work for you. However, for a project like this, it doesn't give you enough control. So, for example, to configure GIFT to talk to a learning record store externally, you have to modify an XML file. At least that's what it says in the documentation. And if you run GIFT in the cloud, you won't have access to the directories. So therefore, you won't be able to follow what the documentation says. And there are all kinds of similarly related issues for both for Moodle as well. If you try to run Moodle in the cloud, you won't be able to install certain plugins. So for our solution, we are currently working on setting up in like the environment and the tools on our local system on our VM. So I'm going to explain the actual like design, how data is going to be transferred, and I guess what you could call a use case. So essentially, a learner, a student, is going to log into Moodle, the front end, and then they're going to. And then what's going to happen is with that login, with that student's unique ID, it's going to pull their record from the learning record store, that database proxy that we're using. And essentially, this is going to, and also the learning record store, not to get off track, but this is going to be the main, this is going to be a central component for transferring the learner states. So keep that in mind. As I explained this. So the first state change is going to occur once they log in. This is essentially going to see where the student is currently in the course, and also is going to pull basically it's going to pull their learning progress as far as XAPI is concerned, which I'll get to further in the next slides. So they're going to go through their course. They're going to complete quizzes and exercises and whatnot. And then once they're done, basically two things will happen. The Moodle plugin for interfacing with Gift is going to call Gift services, and then is going to activate it. And then for the learner states actually being transferred to Gift, is going to get that through the learning record store, and also in the meantime is going to invoke like different Gift modules, and I will also select any like additional courses within the embedded Gift page, and basically this cycle is going to continue of learner data being exchanged between Moodle and Gift in this way until the learner, or the student rather, eventually logs off Moodle, basically. So what we're currently trying to do is we're trying to take Google Forms, or other forms for that matter, and we're trying to convert them into surveys that can be entered into Gift. And also we are trying to figure out a way to develop a structure for XAPI statements that can properly model their competencies in more complex subjects, like what was just described, learning eigenvectors and eigenvalues, because with XAPI, we want to develop a method of how it can reference, I guess you could say, like subcomponents of the overarching topic. So in the next slide, we have this topic, principal component analysis, and you can break this up into several components. You got eigenvectors, you got principal components, covariant matrices, and under those components, you have even more branches for, like, things like the characteristic equation, singular matrix, covariances, et cetera, et cetera. So to model this with XAPI, we were trying to do it with substatements initially, but the problem with that is that substatements are, at least in their documentation, it seems like it's used for like sequences. So for example, say that I logged in and I was doing a course on eigenvectors and eigenvalues. It seems to me that it's like a substatement for it would be like, oh, okay, so Timothy Bernard did singular matrix like quiz, and now he has to do the characteristic equation, right, or something like that. But the problem with this is that because the content of what the student has to do and what the professor is trying to teach is so complex. According to XAPI's documentation, substatements can only be used one step below. So you can't use so you can't make a substatement within a substatement, which is a bit of an issue. So to work around this, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to use cross references between the objects themselves. And to do this, essentially, you have to program in, well, you have to set a unique ID for each of the components, and then if and then in another component you reference that unique ID. So for example, for learning matrices, or matrices, I should say, say that okay, so say the course content has the student first learn vectors and then matrices. Instead of matrices being a substatement of vectors, matrices will just reference vectors, the unique ID for the X API statement for a student completing vectors, if that makes sense. So I believe that's all I have to say on this topic. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Tim. Let me finish the conclusion and the future work. We're going to give time to the questions. We're already pretty much time is over. So what our contribution as a new participants of the GIFT group is try to provide a showcase how to use the interoperability, the plug and play technology centered in GIFT, and to show how to develop an advanced course. The existing course mostly in the K-12 level or lower level. And from the concept map, you can see the complexity of the advanced math is really much more challenging in the relationship and the hierarchies of the concepts. So, but one particular goal is explore new direction for the current NSF-funded project. So far, we have 4 universities, 6 courses. We're going to expand if we can get the money for 10 universities, maybe 20 courses. So in the future work, a lot of things to learn. We are still exploring in the ocean of the concepts and the teams. We're going to learn the CASS to build the competence model with the X API statement. And then we try to incorporate what we developed in the WebBot into the GIFT platform. And in particularly, this last slide is a component design for what we try to do is make this chatbot as an app to embed into the GIFT for collecting teamwork data. So we're going to looking forward to the new GIFTSym8, the GIFT tool. That concludes our talk. Thank you again for giving us the opportunity. Now we leave this, let you guys ask questions. Any questions?
I see a few in the chat. Sheng Yan, did you want to ask your question, or do you prefer I?
Yeah, this is good application. Of course, you use Moodle. We use Moodle too. And you said you have to install Moodle on your own server in order to add modules. Your module. So your module are a custom module that you have to go to the Moodle server to really add it in the mod directory, or can you use this like a most recent version of Moodle that you guys just install plugin by loading a zip file?
We can export and import the zip file by Moodle. The real constraint to use the cloud is we do not have the access to configure new plugin. For example, the learning record store, which we have it in the SCORM cloud and the Amazon EC2.
Yeah.
So they restrict us, and we do not have any control because we need. They do not have the interface for us to download and configure new plugins. That's the constraint.
Okay. We actually we use Learning Locker, and we use Veracity, and also Analytics or LRIS. We can directly connect from Moodle to them.
Oh.
So
yeah,
you do not have to do any customized thing. You can just directly post it within Moodle, and also you can have JavaScript directly posted to LRIS.
There's another constraint of Moodle is either you pay it or it's limited to 50 users and some very small storage for files, like less than a gig, I think.
Well, you can, yeah, what you can do is you can turn off the Moodle native lock so they actually do not increase. And then you directly send it to the learning record store. So you have your own storage.
Oh.
Now, if you use Bitnami, which is, installer, you can specify your CPU and everything. There's unlimited.
That's a great idea. You got to meet the solution. We're going to explore more. And is this Dr. Who, or who is it?
Yeah.
Okay. No, you're the great consultant. You know those things. Yeah, we are still exploring, and that looks like a very good solution, because we really do not need a lot of space, because even our content is all in the cloud, like in the Google Drive or in the YouTube. So we don't need a lot of things for the content. It's just that the student use, we need to bypass that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So there was another question regarding the bot captain. It looks like Timothy addressed it in the chat. I don't know if you want to say anything more to that.
Tim, you want to answer that question?
Well, what is bot captain?
Yeah.
Oh. So Bot Captain is going to be a virtual TA that can be integrated into various social media platforms. And the reason why it can be done so easily is because of the fact that it's built on top of Microsoft Bot Framework, which has a ubiquitous setup for just implementing the application into a variety of different apps and social media sites that students use for team meetings, essentially. So, like, it can be put into anything from GroupMe to Facebook to Slack, even Microsoft Teams. The purpose of it is to essentially guide the discourse of team meetings based off of, I guess what you could say, the level of formality that the meeting is on. So if it's a presentation, then really only one student should be talking at a time. If it's just a general meeting, then it just basically assigns work and questionnaires through like Google Forms, and essentially it grants the actual TA and or the professor a deeper understanding of the type of, like, what students are doing, or rather like what students are saying in their actual meetings, and how students actually feel about I guess, their fellow teammates and the work they're putting in. And it can also measure like some core competencies through surveys. Like essentially you could ask like students like, oh, what are you good at? Are you good at programming? Or are you good at math and statistics? Or are you good at project management? And also it connects to our learning record store. So all these things can be logged in an LRS of any kind. So
all right, yeah, very interesting. I think it's fair to say that we're going to keep a close eye on this project. I know that at some point we would probably be interested in reviewing the changes or extensions that you implemented for this approach, because if it can be more or less included in our baseline, then it can be shared with the community at large quite easily. But we can discuss that later.
Thank you. We're going to learn more about the team model of GIFT to see how much we can use our facility to collect the data and put the data into a good use for the personalized education, in particularly promote the team learning. Thank you. Our time is over. Thank you for all your patience.
Thank you very much. So that brings us to lunch. Appreciate everybody sticking with us through the morning session. We have 6 more great talks scheduled for later this afternoon. So come on back at 12:30 and we'll kick it off. Thanks again. Okay, welcome back from lunch. We're ready to kick off the afternoon session. So we have our first speaker up, Lydia Wang.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Let me see.
25 minutes, and we'll give you a 5-minute warning.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. So can you see my screen?
You're good to go. We see it.
Okay, great. Hello everyone. My name is Li Zheweng. I'm from Computer Engineering and the Institution for Intelligent Systems at the University of Memphis. So my topic today is about the conversation-based intelligent tutoring system, authoring tools in GIFT. So at the beginning, I want to give a short overview about this project. So what we have done for current phases is we successfully implement the local AutoTutor script editor in the GIFT on the desktop version. And the problems we want to solve, actually, the first is we want to have the new and stable script editors, which can benefit both the user and the developer, so that we can take it as a new course component for the GIFT users. So,
we lost your screen there.
Okay.
Not sure how that happened. If you want to reshare.
Sure. Let me reshare it. How about now?
Yep. You're good.
Okay. Okay, so the first part I want to talk about is the AutoTutor, the conversation-based intelligent tutoring system from our labs. So for the name, you can tell it's an ITS to help student learning by holding the conversation. And this is already over 2 decades of research, so that the effectiveness of the AutoTutor in delivering learning was proved, which is around 0.8 sigma. And here I provided tables with the learning gains with different features. So with the basic system, AutoTutor have the learning gain around 0.8, and with for example, like text only, then you have a reduced in the learning, etc. So to make a full functional AutoTutor application, usually